Unbelievable as it may seem, it's episode 26 of Nothing But the Truth. Why 5 months later? Well, it's not due to lack of material, because I think with what goes on in the world on a daily basis, we could probably do an episode every single day. But I do have one topic that I think is of keen interest to anybody who's interested in criminal investigations. And what the heck, let's get to it. Welcome back to Nothing But the Truth. I'm your host, Ramesh Nyberg. I'm a retired homicide investigator, Miami native, author, and a bunch of other stuff. And my mission is to deliver the real deal when it comes to talking about murder investigations, criminal investigations of all kinds. So let's get going. I'm glad you're with me. This is bound to be fun for at least one of us. Yeah, I'm ready. I am ready as ever. It is 2023, and it has been too damn long. And as I said, it is never for lack of material. We're never in short supply of interesting cases that are in the news all the time. You know, this one is going to be a kind of a comeback episode, and it might be kind of short and sweet. For those of you who are coming back and joining me again from way back when, in 2022, thank you for returning and having faith. For those of you who are new, I appreciate you being here, and I hope you get something out of it, whether you're just a casual listener, layperson, or you're an investigator, and maybe a private investigator, or maybe a professional public investigator, like I used to be, and you want to hear some ideas and maybe even sharpen your skills a little bit. And I always welcome feedback from all of you. Before I get started, I just want to tell you a little bit about this format, Buzzsprout podcast format that I chose. It is a wonderful format. If you've ever thought of doing your own podcast, I highly recommend Buzzsprout. It's very easy to sign up. You go there and you just fill out the forms, and bingo, you are on your way. You can join a community of, what is it now, like 11 million people that have their own podcasts. But Buzzsprout makes it easy. I don't think I have ever had to call their tech support people for anything. So go to buzzsprout.com. Get started and see how you can possibly win a $25 gift certificate, I believe it is. So that'll be all be explained in the show notes. Just go ahead and click on the link there, and that'll be that. What I wanted to talk about today was a fascinating case, a horrible case, coming out of Idaho, Moscow, Idaho, which most of you have probably already heard about. This happened back on November 13th, 2022, when 4 University of Idaho students were found murdered in their apartment. Now, they lived in a 2-story house in this little town of Moscow, Idaho, pretty much a rooming house kind of situation. And the 4 deceased students lived upstairs, and there were other students living downstairs. Now, these 4 people that lived upstairs were all very close friends. They went out and partied the night before. There's a lot of evidence and testimony of people that were with them that showed that they were out till roughly 3:30 or 4 in the morning. I think it was a little earlier than that, but they were all in their rooms by around 4 a.m. And the bodies are discovered later that morning. And I won't go into all the detail, but what I wanted to cover were some of the more significant points of this investigation and the ensuing arrest, which just happened recently over the Christmas holidays. You know, if you want the timelines and all those things, they're all online. You'll find dozens of articles about it on CNN, New York Times, and a bunch of other folks have written extensively about this murder case. What struck me the first time I heard about it was the mere fact that you have 4 victims. I mean, this is highly unusual. Now, if you had 1 victim or even 2 victims, and these are college students, you might be thinking, all right, romantic situation, love triangle, revenge, a broken heart, somebody's gone emotionally over the edge. It happens, and we get cases like that. But 4 victims, then that just didn't seem to make sense. And it kind of raised a couple of red flags in my mind. And I immediately thought of 2 people. I thought of Ted Bundy, and I thought of Danny Rolling. Danny Rolling was the so-named Gainesville Ripper who killed, I believe, 6 students, not all at once, but he killed 6 students on the University of Florida campus in Gainesville, Florida, back in the early 90s. Why I thought of them was because these people, Bundy and Rolling, had no relationship, personal relationships, to their victims. They seemed to be somewhat random. They just seemed to be singled out because they were easy targets or because the killer had an insatiable desire to kill. One of the things I saw recently was one of these analysts said, yeah, we don't have a motive. Well, when you don't have a motive after a month of investigating, that means you might be dealing with somebody whose motive is, I like to kill people. I have a desire to kill. And that really portends of a serial killer kind of profile, a personality that might be highly narcissistic, that might be highly control freak type of person who enjoys what they're doing and enjoys watching the process. Now, let's talk about Mr. Bryan Kohberger, who is the defendant in this case, who was just recently arrested in Pennsylvania after going there apparently for the holidays. He did a little bit more than just enjoy the holidays. He spent that time meticulously cleaning the car that he had allegedly used in this attack and placing the items in his neighbor's trash bins. This was all documented during a surveillance in this particular town in Pennsylvania. Kohberger, from what I've read and seen of him, seems to be an extremely cold, reserved, kind of calculating type of person. He is a criminology major, which is very interesting. In fact, he's a PhD student at the University of Washington. The campus where he was going to school at the University of Washington is right across the border from Moscow, Idaho. They're a very short drive in distance apart from one another. And investigators have since learned that after the murders, he returned to school, participated in his criminology classes, and in fact, participated in discussions about this very murder case. And of course, no one knew who he was at the time, but he had discussions with his classmates about this case. Now, this is a person, in my mind, who enjoys knowing that he has accomplished something that he set out to do and that he is the focus of inquiry and the focus of a lot of investigation by the police, and nobody knows who he is. This is thrilling to him. And he's not the first serial killer who probably enjoyed that kind of attention or that kind of secret thrill that they haven't caught me yet. However, there's another dimension to him, and that is that this guy knows about criminal procedure. He knows about investigations. He knows this because he's a PhD criminology student. So he's now watching this entire investigation unfold, and he wants to see how they're doing it. This is just me ruminating now on what I think this guy's about. I could be 100% wrong. But it seems to me that this individual, Bryan Kohberger, who's now been charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary in the state of Idaho, which, by the way, has the death penalty, he is now watching not just an investigation. Now he is watching his own prosecution unfold, and he is now taking part in his own defense. So that's just kind of an overview of what's happened recently and my personal assessment of who I think Bryan Kohberger might be. I would be highly surprised if during this investigation, and of course the investigation is not over, when an arrest happens, that's not the end of the investigation. In fact, that's a pivotal moment in the investigation, which very often opens up all kinds of new avenues and new information. I think that they're going to find, when I say they, I'm talking about all the law enforcement agencies involved. Idaho State Police, for example, the Washington State Police, the local counties and sheriff's offices there that have their own law enforcement agencies, Pennsylvania, where he lived. I think they're all going to be looking into previous cases to see if perhaps Bryan Kohberger's personality or MO might fit any unsolved rapes, murders, or other incidents where he lived or worked or studied. And I would be surprised if they did not find anything. It would be shocking in a way to think that a serial killer or a killer of any kind does this for the first time with random victims, kills 4 people. But I just think this guy probably practiced and worked his way up to this level. And I say that because if you look at people like Ted Bundy and other criminals, they have done things way back to their teenage years and even their adolescent years. I believe our fascination with these cases and the people that commit these kind of crimes, it lies with the question why, and it lies with how. How could anybody do something so savage and so violent to four innocent people that never did anything to him? And I'm not a psychologist, but in dealing with crime for a long time, violent crime, you tend to pick up certain things. You talk to people who are experts in the field. And this Bryan Kohberger fits the description of a sociopath, of a narcissist, ego-driven sociopath who will do whatever he wants to gain his own personal gratification. And if that gratification is to kill, that's what he will do. And he'll do it without remorse. He'll do it without any feeling whatsoever. I think that's what we're seeing unfold with this guy, Bryan Kohberger, who was recently arraigned in court and is now starting the path down the criminal justice procedure process that he, I'm sure, knows very well. He can probably recite it level by level, step by step. That's what's going to happen now. He's pled not guilty, of course, and he is headed for trial, at least for now. And this will be a long process. This will be, I would guess, at least a year before we see this case go to court. We're talking about a lot of discovery material, evidence, witness testimony, all these things that have to be parsed through by the defense, whoever his defense team is. I believe he has a public defender at the moment. But that's where we are with it, and going to be really interesting to watch. I think we're going to learn a lot more about Bryan Kohberger, about his family, about his personality in the coming weeks and months. By the way, before we keep going, I wanted to tell you a little bit about a book that I published recently. It is on Amazon. You can also get it in paperback. It's called The 10 Must-Haves to Be a Great Detective. And I wrote it back in early 2021, 2022, and it's available, as I said, on Amazon. You can download it as an e-Kindle book, or you can order it on paperback. And it's not a very big book. It's 10 chapters. They all kind of are designed to help young investigators or any investigators learn some new tips or maybe refine some old techniques and strategies to better their game and to be better at what they do. That's something that I always try and strive to do, is be better at what I do and everything. Not always successful, but that's my goal. I'm always trying to be a better person, a better dad, a better husband, a better writer, a better teacher, and hopefully a better podcaster. We'll see how that goes. I've just finished a much bigger project that is a memoir about my life and my career growing up here in South Florida and becoming a police officer, and I'm very excited about that. That hopefully will be out next November. I mean, I'm really kind of projecting things here in a hopeful way. I've just finished the last edit. I'm working with an agent, and I'm trying to get this thing geared up for the market by next November when the Miami Book Fair rolls around. That's my target on that. That book is called Badge, Tie, and Gun, Life and Death Journeys of a Miami Detective, and I'm very excited about that, and I'll keep you posted on the progress of that as it moves through the early stages of marketing, or publication actually at this point, and eventual marketing. I've also started on a novel, and just can't stop writing. It's something I've loved to do since I was very little, and I'm working on this novel that I'm also excited about, and that's quite a ways away from completion. I'm in just the first couple of chapters, so more on that as it develops. Let's get back to our case. The police work that was done on this case, I think, was exemplary. I commend the Moscow, Idaho police, the Idaho State Police, and several other agencies that worked with Moscow to get this done. One of the things that was very impressive to me was early on in the case, when the public, the news media, and even the victims' families were clamoring for information. They were all but knocking down the doors of the police department to try and get information about the investigation. What's going on? What are you people doing? What's the evidence? Who's your suspect? And to the credit of the Idaho State Police and the Moscow City Police, they kept mum. They kept quiet about the evidence. They did not talk about Bryan Kohberger, even though they had him identified as a suspect in late November. And this is a hard thing to do. There have been other police departments that have caved into public pressure and given out information that shouldn't have been given out. I know the public wants to know things, and I feel horrible for the victims' families. I've dealt with grieving families of homicide victims many, many times, and it's a very difficult, sensitive thing to do. And you want to try and give them hope and encouragement that there's going to be some form of closure, that we're doing the best we can. And it makes it very hard on them when they don't hear anything, when they're not told about what's happening in the investigation. But what the police have to do is to try and assess the value of giving out that information. What is the value? And moreover, what is the downside? Can this hurt our investigation? Can it compromise the integrity of the investigation? And when you're talking about specific evidence that was found on a crime scene, yes, it can do that. It can harm your investigation down the road. It can muddy up the waters. It can make it difficult for you to identify what is real information coming from witnesses and what is not. It can cause a flood of tips and incoming calls that might be 90% garbage but that you have to handle, and it occupies a lot of manpower and time, and it causes you problems down the road. So they were right, I believe, to be tight-lipped about everything, and it paid off handsomely because they were able to work Kohberger and track him and follow him and learn as much as they could about him and try to build probable cause to arrest him without any real interference. They did a great job of staying the course, steady as she goes, right, and with all the storm around you, and they did it. This resulted in the arrest of Mr. Kohberger. One of the techniques, one of the things they did was to gather as much video evidence as they could of a white Hyundai Elantra that was seen in the area of the murder several times. Or once they found out that there was a student on the Washington State University campus who owned a white Hyundai Elantra named Bryan Kohberger, they started to look at the movements of that vehicle, and they were able to track it meticulously, piecing together all these different events, these video events, showing this vehicle traveling from Washington across the border into Moscow, Idaho, and back at significant times. In addition to that, they did a tremendous job of obtaining a lot of cell phone tower information and piecing together all the pings that came from his cell phone. So there was just a ton of good police work done here. And again, they were able to block out the noise, concentrate on what they were doing, and build a case. The affidavit that was used to obtain the arrest warrant on Kohberger has been released. It's about 18 pages long, and it's real interesting reading if you like sitting around with a glass of wine reading arrest warrant affidavits. Also, I didn't mention the knife, which, the murder weapon has not been found. But interestingly, a knife sheath was found on the scene. And this is a leather sheath with the imprint of the United States Marine Corps, with the eagle, globe, and anchor imprint on the sheath. And this led some people to believe that, this guy's military or whatever. I don't think there was anything that they found that he had a military background or that his father had a military background. But you can buy these things at pawn shops and other outlets. Maybe you can even buy them online. I have no idea. But what's interesting is they did find a DNA profile on that sheath that was left behind by the killer. And they were able to match that DNA profile with evidence that was recovered from his surveillance, the surveillance they did of Kohberger in Pennsylvania, where he was seen cleaning out the car and taking all these things out of the car and putting them in his neighbor's trash bins at 4 a.m., apparently using surgical gloves and everything while he's cleaning this car meticulously in the early morning hours. So there's a lot of interesting information to look up. There's a lot of videos and analyses that are being done by various experts. But I hope you'll stick with Nothing But the Truth as well. Come back and, continue talking about this here, because it's going to be a long road. And we're going to find out more. We're going to find out a lot about him I think they might even be able to develop some more evidence against him. And of course, the prosecutors are going to be gearing up for whatever the defense might come up with. And that might be insanity. Who knows? Once again, appreciate you being here. And we will be talking about this case again. We'll be talking about other cases. There's all kinds of other interesting cases going on always when it comes to crime and violence. And that's what we're here to talk about. And we'll do it honestly and as accurately as possible. And I'll give you my opinion. And I'm not an expert, but I've done a lot of this kind of stuff. I want to hear from you. I love to hear feedback. I would love to hear your ideas. I love to learn from others. That's what it's all about for me. So we'll see you next time. And as I always say, always put your best foot forward, but don't forget to work on your other foot. Take care. We'll see you next time.